Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to examine a story that sits at the very heart of international politics, economics, and energy. Diplomacy. The growing tensions between the United States and India over New Delhi's continued purchase of Russian crude oil. A recent statement by U.S. Trade Advisor Peter Navarro has sparked debate across the world. Navarro was blunt. He said that India's Russian crude buying must stop. Now, such a statement is not merely a passing comment. It carries with it the weight of Washington's growing frustration and highlights the crossroads at which India finds itself. On one side, India is a major strategic partner for the United States, particularly in balancing the rise of China in the Indo-Pacific region. On the other, India has a deep-rooted relationship with Russia, spanning defense, diplomacy, and crucially, energy security. The question we are left with is this: can India afford to bow down to American pressure and cut ties with Russia in the oil market? Or will it prioritize its national interest even at the cost of friction with Washington? Over the next 30 minutes, I will walk you through the complexity of this issue. We will explore why India continues to buy Russian crude, why the U.S. is so concerned, what this means for global geopolitics, and what lies ahead. By the end, I hope we will understand that this controversy is not just about oil, but about the future of alliances, the resilience of national sovereignty, and the changing global order. First, let us ask, why does India continue to buy Russian crude in the first place? The answer lies in a blend of economics, geography, and strategy. When the war in Ukraine broke out in 2022, Western nations quickly moved to sanction Russia, banning most imports of Russian oil and gas. This left Russia searching for alternative markets. India, with its rapidly growing energy demand, became an obvious partner. Russia began offering steep discounts on crude oil, sometimes 20 to 30% lower than global prices. For India, a country that imports over 85% of its crude needs, this was an opportunity too good to pass up. Energy is the lifeblood of India's economy. With a population of 1.4 billion people and industries expanding at record speed, India cannot afford to pay premium prices for oil. Cheaper Russian crude has allowed the Indian government to stabilize domestic fuel prices, control inflation, and support economic growth, even as global markets remain turbulent. But beyond economics, there is a political and historical dimension. India and Russia have shared a close relationship for decades. During the Cold War, when the United States often leaned toward Pakistan, Moscow stood by New Delhi, providing diplomatic, military, and economic support. Even today, nearly 60% of India's defense equipment originates from Russia. For Indian policymakers, cutting off Russian oil is not just about money. It risks undermining a trusted strategic partnership. Therefore, India has consistently argued that its purchase of Russian oil is a matter of national interest. Officials in New Delhi have said time and again, energy security cannot be compromised. India must put its people first. And this is why, even after repeated warnings from Washington, Indian refiners continue to import millions of barrels of Russian crude every month. Now, let's turn to the American perspective. Why is the United States so alarmed by India's Russian oil imports? From Washington's viewpoint, every dollar that flows to Moscow strengthens President Putin's ability to fund the war in Ukraine. When India buys Russian crude, even at discounted rates, it provides Russia with revenue streams that help cushion the blow of Western sanctions. To U.S. policymakers, this undermines the collective effort of NATO, European Union, and G7 nations to isolate Russia economically. Peter Navarro's statement reflects this frustration. For Washington, it is not just about oil, it's about loyalty and alignment. If India wants to be seen as a reliable partner in the U.S.-led strategic framework, particularly through groupings like the Quad, then American officials expect New Delhi to align more closely with Western sanctions. Furthermore, the U.S. is facing domestic political pressure. American voters, weary of high fuel prices, often question why allies like India are buying cheaper Russian oil while the U.S. pays the economic price of leading the sanctions regime. Navarro's comments therefore also serve a domestic audience, portraying the administration as tough on both Russia and its partners. But it's not all about pressure. There's also an element of competition. The U.S. is today one of the world's top oil and gas producers. Every barrel of Russian oil bought by India is a barrel less that could have been sourced from American suppliers or Middle Eastern allies aligned with Washington. In that sense, India's Russian purchases directly cut into the potential market for U.S. energy exports. This is why Navarro and other U.S. officials have drawn a hard line. They want India to rethink its dependence on Moscow. But the big question remains, will India comply? India finds itself in a delicate balancing act. On the one hand, the U.S. is a critical strategic partner, providing access to advanced defense technologies, investments, and support in international forums. On the other hand, Russia remains a long-standing ally with whom India shares deep trust. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has so far managed this balancing act with remarkable diplomacy. In meetings with U.S. leaders, he has stressed the importance of the U.S.-India relationship. Yet in forums with Russia, Modi has maintained a respectful, pragmatic tone, reiterating India's position of neutrality on the Ukraine war while quietly expanding oil purchases. This balancing act is rooted in India's philosophy of strategic autonomy. For decades, New Delhi has avoided aligning too closely with any single power bloc. During the Cold War, it was the non-aligned movement. Today, it is a careful calibration of ties with the U.S., Russia, Europe, and even China, depending on national interest. In practice, this means India will listen to U.S. concerns, but it will not blindly follow them. For instance, Indian officials have argued that Europe itself continues to import Russian energy through indirect channels, even as it criticizes India. Why should India be singled out for doing what is necessary for its economy? This independence is what makes India's position so fascinating. It is not simply defiance for the sake of defiance. It is a demonstration of a rising power asserting its sovereignty in a multipolar world. The ripple effects of this standoff are global. First, it exposes the limits of Western sanctions. Despite unprecedented unity among the U.S. and its allies, Russia has managed to reroute much of its oil to markets like India and China. This raises questions about whether sanctions can truly cripple a resource-rich economy in an interconnected world. Second, it highlights India's growing role as a global swing player. Much like Saudi Arabia in the energy markets of the past, India's decisions today shape the flows of oil and influence global prices. When Indian refiners buy Russian oil, they not only stabilize their domestic markets, but also indirectly affect the global balance of supply and demand. Third, the issue complicates U.S.-India relations at a time when Washington needs New Delhi more than ever. As tensions with China grow in the Indo-Pacific, the U.S. views India as a natural counterweight. But these oil disagreements risk creating mistrust. And finally, the controversy underscores the changing nature of global order. For decades, the U.S. dictated the terms of international politics. But today, rising powers like India are asserting their independence. This is not the world of the 1990s. It is a multipolar world where Washington's voice is powerful, but not absolute. So, where do we go from here? It is unlikely that India will completely halt its purchase of Russian oil in the near term. The economic incentives are simply too strong. However, India may seek to gradually diversify its sources, increasing imports from the U.S., the Middle East, and Africa to reduce dependency on Russia. The U.S., on its part, will likely continue to pressure India, but may soften its stance if it sees broader strategic gains. Already, there is recognition in Washington that pushing India too hard may backfire, driving New Delhi closer to Moscow or even Beijing. Ultimately, both nations need each other. The U.S. needs India as a partner in the Indo-Pacific. India needs the U.S. for technology, trade, and support against China. Oil disagreements will cause turbulence, but they are unlikely to derail the relationship entirely. In conclusion, Navarro's statement that India's Russian crude buying must stop captures the core of a larger debate: the tension between alliance and autonomy. For the U.S., India's oil purchases are a problem. For India, they are a necessity. This standoff is not just about barrels of oil. It is about how nations navigate a world that is no longer unipolar. It is about how rising powers like India define their sovereignty in the face of external pressure. And it is about the future of a global order where no single country, not even the United States, can dictate terms without compromise. As we watch these events unfold, one thing is clear: the choices India makes today will shape not only its own future, but also the balance of power in the 21st century. Thank you.